First contact folly. Ambassador Sarah Chen massaged her temples as she stared at the holographic message floating above her desk. The Zularian diplomatic courts had just sent what they probably thought was a routine invitation to view their military capabilities. Instead, it was about to become the biggest headache of her career. "Ma'am," her AI assistant chimed. "Lieutenant Marcus Wade is here about the incident." Chen sighed. "Send him in." The doors slid open to reveal a tall human with a perpetual grin that had caused more than one diplomatic crisis. Wade was Earth's foremost expert on advanced robotics and mechanical warfare. He was also, unfortunately, the exact kind of human that made alien species nervous. "You wanted to see me, Ambassador." Wade's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Sit down, Lieutenant. We need to discuss your behavior at yesterday's demonstration." "Oh, come on. I barely touched anything." "You ask High Commander Vizix if their X-89 battle mech could do a backflip." "Well, can it?" Chen pulled up the security footage. The massive 4-story tall war machine dominated the frame, its crystalline armor gleaming under alien suns. The Zularians had spent centuries perfecting these machines, turning them into the most sophisticated weapons platforms in known space. And there was Wade, practically bouncing on his toes, asking if they could soup it up a bit. "The Zularians," Chen explained slowly, "consider these machines to be sacred instruments of warfare. They are not toys." "Ambassador, with all due respect, they're totally missing the potential here." Wade pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the surface. "Look at these specs. The neural interface, the quantum stabilizers, the gravity manipulation systems. They're using maybe 40% of what these babies can do." "Lieutenant, I already have some ideas for modifications. Nothing crazy, just a few tweaks to the hydraulics, maybe upgrade the power core." "Lieutenant Wade," Chen's voice cracked like a whip, "you are not going to modify alien military hardware for fun." The door chimed again. This time, it was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's lead xenotechnologist. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with barely contained excitement. "Ambassador, you need to see this." She projected a new hologram, schematics of the X-89, covered in annotations. The Zularians' design philosophy. It's like they built the universe's most advanced racing car and never took it out of first gear. Chen felt a familiar dread settling in her stomach. "Not you two. The stabilization systems alone are revolutionary, but they're so conservative with them. And don't get me started on the neural interface limitations." "Exactly," Wade jumped in. "It's like putting a governor on a Ferrari." Chen looked between the two of them, recognizing the dangerous glint in their eyes. It was the same look humans got before doing something either brilliant or catastrophic, usually both. "The Zularians, she tried one last time, will never agree to this." "Actually," Dr. Tanaka smiled, "they might. I've been talking with their junior engineers. They're curious, especially after Wade showed them those old Pacific Rim movies." "You did what?" "Cultural exchange," Wade protested. "Besides, even their high commander admitted they've never pushed these machines to their limits. They're too focused on precision and control. That's because they're weapons of war. Everything humans touch becomes a sport eventually," Tanaka pointed out. "Remember what happened with fighter jets?" Chen did remember. The Intergalactic Aerobatics Championship was now one of the most watched sporting events in known space. "Look," Wade leaned forward, suddenly serious. "This could be huge for human-Zularian relations. They see us as reckless children. We see them as stuffy traditionalists. But what if we could show them something new? Something that combines their engineering genius with human creativity. By racing their sacred war machines. By showing them what their sacred war machines can really do," Tanaka corrected. "Besides, the junior engineers are already drawing up preliminary modifications. They're calling it Project Velocity." Chen looked at the schematics again. The annotations were in both human and Zularian script, showing a level of cooperation she hadn't thought possible. If, and I mean if, I support this madness, there will be rules. Wade and Tanaka nodded eagerly. No weapons systems, no unauthorized modifications. Everything gets approved through proper channels. Of course. And you'll need to convince High Commander Vizix. Wade's grin widened. Already working on it. Did you know the Zularians have never seen drag racing? As Chen watched them leave, already deep in technical discussion, she opened a new diplomatic channel. She had a feeling she was going to need to update Earth's insurance policies. What followed would be remembered as either the greatest advancement in human-alien relations or the most expensive diplomatic incident in history. Probably both. Engineering chaos. The Zularian military engineering complex wasn't designed for laughter. Its towering crystalline spires and austere halls were meant to inspire awe and reverence for the sacred art of warfare, which made the current situation all the more surreal. You want to put what in the quantum drive? High Engineer Kovacs's facial tentacles twisted in confusion. Nitrous oxide. Lieutenant Wade was practically vibrating with excitement. Look, I've run the simulations. If we inject it directly into the quantum matrix, the sacred texts specifically forbid altering the quantum harmonics. Yes, but have you tried it? Kovacs's tentacles twisted further. Well, no. Trust me, Dr. Tanaka chimed in from underneath the X-89's massive leg assembly. The quantum harmonics are the least of what we're about to violate. The massive hangar had transformed over the past week. Where once stood perfectly aligned rows of battle mechs, now chaos reigned. Humans and Zularians swarmed over the machines like ants, removing armor plates, rewiring systems, and generally doing things that made the senior engineers develop nervous tics. The first X-89, now dubbed Thunder Child by its human Zularian engineering team, barely resembled its original form. Its pristine crystal armor had been stripped down to the essential plates, replaced in parts by what Wade insisted was high-performance polymer composite, but looked suspiciously like carbon fiber with racing stripes. The stabilization matrix is online. Called out Junior Engineer Zrill, her tentacles wrapped around multiple control interfaces. And it's... Wait, why is it playing something called Initial D? Essential testing music, Wade explained. Can't properly tune a racing machine without Eurobeat. Ambassador Chen, watching from a safe distance, noticed something odd. The younger Zularians were starting to bob their head tentacles in time with the music. Ambassador. A quiet voice drew her attention. It was High Commander Vizix, looking simultaneously horrified and fascinated. Is this normal? For humans, this is actually quite restrained. A massive crash interrupted their conversation. Everyone turned to see Thunderchild attempting what appeared to be a dance move. Sorry, Tanaka called out. Neural interface calibration is still a bit sensitive. The neural interface isn't supposed to interpret dance moves. Kovacs protested. Not with that attitude, it won't. Chen noticed Vizix watching the proceedings with an odd expression. High Commander? Are you all right? I've served in the military for 300 cycles. Vizix said slowly. I've never seen an X-89 move like that. It's heretical. Another crash. Thunderchild was now attempting to moonwalk. And yet, Vizix continued, I cannot look away. The next few days brought more changes. Word had spread through the Zularian Engineering Corps about the modifications, and to everyone's surprise, more young engineers kept volunteering. They arrived with data pads full of ideas they'd never dared propose before. You mean you've never tried reconfiguring the gravity manipulators for drift mechanics? Wade asked one particularly enthusiastic group. Such alterations would be... Kovacs searched for the word. Awesome, Wade suggested. Unprecedented, Kovacs finished. But Chen noticed their tentacles were curling, and what she'd learned was the Zularian equivalent of suppressed excitement. The breakthrough came 3 days later. Thunderchild stood in the center of the testing grounds, its modified systems humming with power. Wade sat in the modified cockpit, neural interface cables connecting him directly to the machine. All systems nominal, Tanaka reported. Quantum matrix stable. Neural sync at 100%. Ready for initial mobility test. Remember, Chen called out, nothing crazy. Wade's grin was visible even through the cockpit's crystal viewport. Define crazy. Before anyone could stop him, Thunderchild moved. Not with the usual ponderous grace of a battle mech, but with the fluid agility of a dancer. It sprinted across the testing ground, leaving trails of quantum fire in its wake. Then it jumped. That's not possible, Kovacs whispered as the massive machine performed a perfect backflip. The mass calculations alone. Physics, Wade's voice crackled over the comm, is more of a suggestion when you've got quantum drift mechanics. Thunderchild landed with impossible grace, then proceeded to perform what Tanaka later explained was a sick slide drift that left reality-warping afterimages in its wake. Chen looked at Vizix, expecting outrage. Instead, she found the High Commander leaning forward, head tentacles fully extended in what she recognized as intense interest. The sacred texts, Vizix said slowly, may need updating. That's when the real chaos began. Other engineering teams started requesting permission to modify their own mechs. Young Zularians were caught studying Earth race culture in their off hours. Someone, Chen suspected Wade, had started an underground racing simulator league. This is getting out of hand, Chen told her AI assistant that evening, watching footage of Thunderchild performing increasingly impossible maneuvers. Perhaps, the AI replied. But noticed the interaction patterns between human and Zularian personnel. Chen had noticed. The usual formal barriers had broken down. Species that had viewed each other with suspicious formality were now excitedly sharing ideas, arguing over modifications, and celebrating breakthroughs together. Still, she said, watching Thunderchild pull off something that made several physicists demand to check their equipment, we should probably establish some rules before. Her communicator chimed. It was Wade. Ambassador, quick question. Hypothetically, if someone were to accidentally create a temporary quantum time loop during a drift maneuver, how much paperwork would that involve? Chen put her head in her hands. How temporary? Like 12 seconds. Maybe 15 if you count the parallel timeline where Thunderchild is currently breakdancing. As Chen began drafting what would become the first official rulebook for quantum mech racing, she couldn't help but smile. The universe was about to get a lot more interesting. And somewhere in the complex, another X-89 started playing Eurobeat. That's when the real chaos began. Other engineering teams started requesting permission to modify their own mechs. Young Zularians were caught studying Earth race culture in their off hours. Someone, Chen suspected Wade, had started an underground racing simulator league. This is getting out of hand, Chen told her AI assistant that evening, watching footage of Thunderchild performing increasingly impossible maneuvers. Perhaps, the AI replied. But noticed the interaction patterns between human and Zularian personnel. Chen had noticed. The usual formal barriers had broken down. Species that had viewed each other with suspicious formality were now excitedly sharing ideas, arguing over modifications, and celebrating breakthroughs together. Still, she said, watching Thunderchild pull off something that made several physicists demand to check their equipment, we should probably establish some rules before. Her communicator chimed. It was Wade. Ambassador, quick question. Hypothetically, if someone were to accidentally create a temporary quantum time loop during a drift maneuver, how much paperwork would that involve? Chen put her head in her hands. How temporary? Like 12 seconds. Maybe 15 if you count the parallel timeline where Thunderchild is currently breakdancing. As Chen began drafting what would become the first official rulebook for quantum mech racing, she couldn't help but smile. The universe was about to get a lot more interesting. And somewhere in the complex, another X-89 started playing Eurobeat. The Great Race Debate. The Galactic Council chamber wasn't designed for shouting matches. Its acoustic architecture was meant to carry dignified proclamations and measured debates. Today, it was carrying something else entirely. Order. Supreme Counselor Zinfar's crystalline voice cut through the chaos. We will have order in this chamber. On the main display, footage of Thunderchild performing what humans called a triple cork spiral with quantum drift played on loop. Several physicist delegates were having existential crises. The humans have corrupted our most sacred military technology. The Zularian Conservative Party representatives' tentacles were tied in literal knots of outrage. Actually, Wade stepped forward, somehow maintaining his characteristic grin even under the glare of 1,000 alien diplomats. We've improved it. Thunderchild's mobility and response time have increased by 300%. The quantum efficiency is up 427%. And that's not even counting the sick moves. Lieutenant, Chen whispered urgently, please stop helping. But it was too late. Word had spread beyond the Zularian Empire. Other species had seen the footage. The Arcturian delegation was particularly interested in the quantum drift mechanics. The Proxians had already submitted formal requests to study the modified neural interfaces. This is unprecedented. The conservative representative continued. These machines are meant for warfare, not sports, suggested a young Zularian engineer who'd snuck into the chamber. Because technically, if you look at the original design documents, nowhere does it specifically forbid using quantum mechanics for sick drifts. Chen noticed more young Zularians nodding. Even some of the council members were watching the replay with poorly concealed interest. Perhaps a new voice cut in. We should consider the diplomatic implications. All eyes turned to Ambassador Tilara of the Centaurian Confederation. Known for their logical approach and deep understanding of cultural dynamics, the Centaurians rarely spoke without careful consideration. Continue, Supreme Counselor Xanvar commanded. Tilara's holographic form flickered as she gestured to new data streams. In the past month, cooperation between human and Zularian engineering teams has increased by 742%. Cultural exchange program participation is up 1,200%. And applications to joint technical programs have overwhelmed our processing systems. But the sacred traditions, the conservative representative began, are evolving. Tilara interrupted smoothly. As they should. Static cultures stagnate. The humans haven't corrupted your technology. They've shown you new possibilities. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, her usual calm demeanor in full diplomatic mode. If I may, the modifications we've developed have applications far beyond racing. The improved neural interfaces alone could revolutionize medical technology. The quantum drift mechanics have implications for space travel. And the structural improvements. Did someone say structural improvements? A new voice boomed through the chamber. Everyone turned to see High Commander Vizix striding in, followed by a team of senior military analysts. High Commander, the conservative representative's tentacles writhed hopefully. Surely you oppose this perversion of our sacred war machines. Vizix's facial tentacles curved in what Chen had learned was the Zularian equivalent of a smirk. Actually, I've just finished reviewing the combat performance data from our modified units. The chamber went silent. The improvements in mobility, response time, and quantum efficiency don't just make for an impressive show. They make for better war machines. Vizix projected new data streams. The human modifications have inadvertently solved problems our engineers have struggled with for centuries. But the conservative representative was running out of tentacles to twist. Furthermore, Vizix continued, the cultural exchange has been enlightening. They paused. I particularly enjoy this Eurobeat music during combat simulations. Wade's grin threatened to break physical laws. That's when the Arcturian High Commissioner spoke up. We want in. Pardon? Chen asked. The racing. We want to participate. The Arcturian battle frames could benefit from similar modifications. The Proxian Collective would also like to submit our war walkers for consideration. Another delegate chimed in. The Centaurian Confederation has several platforms that could be adapted. Soon, the chamber was filled with delegates trying to submit their own war machines for what was rapidly becoming an intergalactic racing league. This is unprecedented, Supreme Counselor HFY muttered. Welcome to dealing with humans, Chen replied sympathetically. You might want to start drafting regulations now. The next few hours were chaos as species after species submitted proposals, suggested modifications, and argued over racing classifications. The conservative representative had fainted around the time someone suggested adding neon underglow to the sacred war machines. There will need to be rules, HFY announced finally. Strict regulations, safety protocols. Of course, Wade agreed quickly, almost too quickly, Chen thought. And proper documentation for all modifications. Already done. Tanaka produced several data crystals, complete technical specifications, safety protocols, and she glanced at Wade. Most of the quantum anomaly containment procedures. Most of, Chen whispered. Some things you're better off not knowing about, Wade whispered back. Like what happened in Testing Bay 7. What happened in Testing Bay 7? Technically, nothing. Also technically, everything. Simultaneously, we're still sorting out the temporal paperwork. Chen made a mental note to update her insurance again. As the Council began drafting what would become the official regulations for intergalactic combat platform racing, First Edition, Chen noticed something remarkable. Species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries were now eagerly discussing modification possibilities. Ancient rivals were debating racing techniques instead of border disputes. This might actually work, she told Wade and Tanaka as they left the chamber. Of course it will, Wade replied. Everyone loves racing, even physics-defying war machines. Speaking of physics, Tanaka checked her tablet. Thunderchild's quantum probability field is acting up again. It's either trying to achieve sentience or challenging the space-time continuum to a drift competition. Again, Wade sighed. I told it to wait until after the first official race for any existential breakthroughs. As they hurried off to prevent their war machine from accidentally discovering new laws of physics, Chen couldn't help but smile. The universe was never going to be the same. And somewhere in the quantum probability field, Thunderchild was still playing Eurobeat. Race Day Revolution. The morning of the first intergalactic combat platform racing championship dawned with what could only be described as quantum uncertainty. Literally, the weather forecast is having trouble deciding if it's going to be sunny, rainy, or experiencing temporal displacement, Dr. Tanaka reported, studying her instruments. I blame Thunderchild's probability field. Sorry about that, Wade called from the cockpit. She gets excited on race days. The stadium, hastily converted from a Zularian military testing ground, was packed with spectators from across the galaxy. The massive quantum screens showed the various teams making final preparations, each pit crew a mix of species working in surprisingly harmonious chaos. Ambassador Chen watched from the diplomatic box as Thunderchild performed its pre-race checks, occasionally flickering between different quantum states. Next to it, the Arcturian entry Stellar Drift gleamed in iridescent metals, its gravity manipulators humming in harmony with what appeared to be classical music. An interesting cultural fusion, Tilera observed from her position beside Chen. The Arcturians have embraced human racing culture while maintaining their own aesthetic preferences. Is that the Proxian entry playing death metal? Indeed, they find it improves quantum resonance. The starting line was a sight that would have been impossible just months ago. 8 war machines, each modified far beyond their original specifications, lined up for what promised to be either the greatest racing event in history or the most expensive insurance claim ever filed. Possibly both. Final checks. Wade's voice crackled over the comm. Quantum drift matrix. Online and probably stable. Tanaka replied. Probability field containment, mostly containing probabilities. Neural interface, synchronized and only slightly breaking causality. Good enough for me. Chen noticed High Commander Vizix watching the proceedings with an expression she'd learned to recognize as proud anxiety. Having second thoughts. Always, Vizix replied. But also, their tentacles curled in excitement. I placed a bet on Thunderchild. The countdown began. The quantum screens showed close-ups of each pilot, their neural interfaces glowing as they synchronized with their machines. Wade's perpetual grin was matched by the Arthurian pilot's serene smile, the Proxian's focused intensity, and the young Zularian pilot's tentacle-curling determination. 3. Thunderchild's quantum drive spun up, reality rippling around it. 2. The Arcturian stellar drift began harmonizing with the quantum field. 1. The Proxian War Walker's death metal reached a crescendo. Go. What followed defied several laws of physics and at least one law of thermodynamics. Thunderchild launched forward in a burst of quantum fire, leaving a trail of probability echoes in its wake. Stellar drift flowed through space like liquid metal, its movements a dance of precision and power. The Proxian entry somehow had banged its way into a quantum drift. First turn coming up, Tanaka called out. Quantum field stability at. Well, stability is a relative concept right now. Thunderchild hit the turn at speeds that made relativity nervous. Wade engaged the drift systems, and reality briefly forgot how to physics. The massive war machine slid sideways through spacetime, trailing afterimages across multiple probability states. That's not supposed to be possible, one of the physics advisors shouted. Tell that to Thunderchild. Wade laughed as he pushed the machine into an impossible spiral. The race quickly evolved into something beyond mere competition. Each team brought their own style, their own interpretation of what was possible when you combined ancient war machines with human racing culture. The Arcturians turned their run into a ballet of precision drifting. The Proxians discovered that quantum probability fields responded surprisingly well to power metal solos. Are they dancing? Chen asked as Thunderchild and Stellar Drift engaged in what appeared to be a synchronized quantum drift through the anti-gravity section. Cultural exchange in action, Tilera noted approvingly. That's when things got really interesting. Thunderchild's probability field began interacting with the other machine's quantum signatures. Reality started getting creative with its interpretation of racing lines. Wade, Tanaka's voice cracked with concern. The quantum harmonics are approaching critical resonance. You mean we're about to do something awesome? I mean we're about to. Oh no. Legacy of Speed. 1 year after the first championship, the Galactic Quantum Racing League, GQRL, had become the most watched sporting event in known space. The diplomatic archives would later mark this period as the beginning of the quantum racing era, though most humans just called it, that time we taught aliens how to drift. Ambassador Chen stood in the newly constructed GQRL headquarters, watching holographic replays of the latest races. Thunderchild, now sporting what Wade insisted were necessary quantum flame decals, was teaching a group of young pilots from 17 different species about the finer points of probability drift mechanics. Still having second thoughts? Dr. Tanaka asked, joining her at the window. Always, Chen replied. But I have to admit, this has gone better than expected. The evidence was everywhere. The main hangar housed war machines from dozens of species, each modified with their own unique combination of traditional engineering and racing culture. Young engineers from historically rival species worked side by side, arguing good-naturedly about quantum harmonics and drift techniques. Ambassador, Wade's voice crackled over the comm. Quick question about the new regulations. No quantum time loops during practice runs, Chen said automatically. But what the f? No parallel dimension drafting either. You're no fun. Wade paused. How about? If it involves breaking causality, the answer is no. The regulations had grown considerably since the first race. The original document, hastily written on the back of a quantum physics textbook, had evolved into the comprehensive guidelines for quantum-enhanced racing and probability field management, with additional notes on why we can't just break physics because it would be cool. Speaking of regulations, Tanaka checked her tablet. The Arcturians have submitted a proposal for a new racing class. Something about combining their crystalline technology with quantum drift mechanics. The Proxians want to add a sound system category, Chen sighed. Apparently, they've discovered that certain frequency combinations can enhance quantum resonance. Is that why testing Bay 12 is still playing death metal in 5 dimensions? 7 dimensions now. We've had to update the warning signs. The impact of the racing league extended far beyond sports. Trade agreements were being negotiated in pit lanes. Diplomatic tensions were resolved through friendly competition. Even the Zularian Conservative Party had come around, after discovering that racing modifications had improved their military readiness by 300%. Ambassador Chen, a young Zularian engineer, rushed up, tentacles curled in excitement. You need to see this. The main quantum screen showed Thunderchild teaching a newly modified Centaurian Warwalker how to drift. The massive machine, traditionally known for its stoic precision, was attempting what appeared to be a quantum moonwalk. Is that Eurobeat mixed with Centaurian war hymns? Cultural fusion, Tanaka explained. It's become quite popular. In the years since the first race, the technology had evolved in ways no one could have predicted. The quantum drift mechanics, originally developed for racing, had revolutionized space travel. The enhanced neural interfaces were being adapted for medical use. Even the probability field manipulation techniques have found applications in quantum computing. Remember when we thought this would be a diplomatic disaster? Chen asked. To be fair, Tanaka replied, it still technically is. We just found out that Thunderchild's quantum signature has become a minor deity in 3 different dimensions. Again, Wade says it's not his fault this time. Apparently, the quantum probability field developed a sense of humor. The upcoming season promised to be even more interesting. New teams were joining, bringing their own traditions and innovations. The Arcturians had developed what they called quantum aesthetic drift, somehow making their machines more efficient by making them more beautiful. The Proxians had discovered that certain guitar riffs could stabilize probability fields. Ambassador, Wade's voice again. Hypothetically, if someone were to accidentally create a racing line that exists in all possible timelines simultaneously. Lieutenant, it's for science. Chen watched as Thunderchild demonstrated a move that made several physicists demand to check their equipment. The massive war machine, once a symbol of military might, now moved with a grace that defied both gravity and common sense. You know, Tanaka said thoughtfully, we've actually achieved something remarkable here. We've turned instruments of war into bridges between cultures. Through the power of illegal street racing in quantum-enhanced war machines, Chen added, the best kind of diplomacy. As they watched the next generation of pilots practice their moves, Chen realized that this was humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not just the technology or the racing, but the ability to look at something designed for war and see the potential for joy. Thunderchild executed a perfect quantum drift, trailing probability echoes that somehow formed a smiley face in 4-dimensional space. The young pilots cheered, their various appendages raised in celebration. Species that had once pointed weapons at each other now shared racing techniques and argued about the best quantum drift music. Next season's going to be interesting, Wade said, joining them at the window. The Proxians are working on something they call quantum metal. Apparently, it involves breaking the speed of light with the power of sick guitar solos. Chen didn't even bother protesting anymore. This was the new normal. A galaxy where ancient war machines danced through quantum probability fields to the sound of mixed species musical fusion, where peace was maintained through friendly competition and shared love of ridiculous modifications. And somewhere in the quantum probability field, Thunderchild was still playing Eurobeat, its melody echoing across dimensions, a testament to what happens when humanity shares its particular brand of chaos with the universe. After all, as Wade liked to say, everything's better with racing stripes, even reality itself. The end.